0 Hour, Mind. Written by Ceri Clark. Narrated using Minimax. A Beyond the Hull story. Book 1 in the 0 Hour series. This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. All rights reserved. Part 1. By the time Rafe recognized something was wrong, it was already too late for coffee. The dispenser's panel blinked red. He jabbed the button twice more, producing nothing but an indignant electronic whine. The corporate bean powder they stocked hadn't been anywhere near Earth, much less an actual plant. Still, it was part of his ritual. Cup, steam, suffering, mourning. Rafe tapped the top of the old dispenser with the practiced force of a man trying not to punch something that beeped. It beeped anyway, loud and petulant. "I know where you sleep," he muttered at the unit, leaning in close enough to fog the status panel with his breath. "Threats against station assets are logged," came the AI's voice from the overhead speaker, lazy, tinny, and just self-aware enough to make him uncomfortable. "Would you like to file a grievance with supply? Only if I get to deliver it in person." With a shovel. Rafe pried open the machine's front panel, revealing a tangle of wires and tubes that looked more like mechanical intestines than engineering. The AI didn't reply. It rarely appreciated his wit. That was fine. He had enough charm for both of them. He extracted a dribble of lukewarm sludge, enough to half-fill his mug, and grimaced as he sipped. It tasted like someone had dissolved industrial lubricant in tepid bathwater. He turned back to the main command terminal where screens glowed in low amber. Atmospheric stable. Mining bots 6 through 12 still offline normal for the night shift. Power draw within limits. Personnel vitals, green, across the board. Boring. Good. The monitors bathed his face in electronic twilight as he scrolled through diagnostic readouts. That meant he could finish his cup, file the daily report, and maybe, just maybe, fall asleep on his feet before anything went catastrophically sideways. Just another day managing Titan Delta Station, just another shift of watching other people's dreams of mineral wealth transform into corporate dividends. Then the clocks froze. The timestamp on his HUD stopped dead at 4:0. He blinked. The display didn't. That's odd. He tapped the corner of his screen, expecting the numbers to refresh. Rafe looked up. Every terminal screen in the command deck was frozen. Static pulsed faintly at the edges, like digital breath. Even the analog wall clock, one of the old backup systems installed by paranoid engineers, had stopped ticking. Its second hand twitched like a dying insect, stuck on 12. Rafe tapped his wristpad. No response. His neural implant still hummed against the base of his skull, but there was no interface, no network sync. A soft electrical whine filled the air, barely perceptible but crawling along his spine like cold fingers. He didn't like it. Not one bit. "Delta," he said, voice calm but sharp. "System check." No reply. "Delta. Confirm mainframe integrity." Nothing. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Overhead panels dimmed, then brightened like a heartbeat, casting strange shadows across the burnished steel floor. Then the scream came. Faint. Garbled. Somewhere down the corridor, in the habitat ring. Rafe was already moving. He snatched his sidearm from the charger port and slapped the emergency access panel. Nothing happened. The door remained sealed. Manual override. He yanked the physical handle hidden beneath the console. The hydraulics hissed, and the door grudgingly slid open 6 inches before grinding to a halt. Rafe wedged his shoulder into the gap, muscles straining against the reinforced titanium. The door budged another foot. Enough. He squeezed through sideways and broke into a run. He took the long corridor at full tilt, boots clanging against reinforced deck plating. The scream hadn't repeated, but the silence that followed was worse. Emergency lights pulsed at irregular intervals, casting the hallway in alternating shadow and harsh red illumination. Sector 9, mess hall, wide open, poor lighting. Fluorescent strips flickered like dying stars. He slid to a stop at the entryway and felt his gut tighten. 23 people stood inside. Stood. Not moved, not spoke, not blinked. One miner, a young woman named Holt, he remembered her file, held a spoon mid-air. Her eyes stared forward, wide, unfocused. Steam rose gently from her tray, spiraling in the still air. Another leaned forward on a bench, arms slack at his sides, lips parted like he was about to speak. No one spoke. No one breathed too deeply. They were alive. But they were gone. Hey! Anyone hear me? Rafe snapped his fingers in front of the closest worker's face, a big man called Holstein who ran the salvage operations. The man was known for scrapping everything from surplus ice hauler parts to decommissioned orbital modules. No response, not even a flicker in his dilated pupils. Rafe approached Holt slowly, waving his hand in front of her face. No reaction. He touched her shoulder, tense, muscles locked like carbon steel. Her skin was warm but eerily rigid, as though she'd been flash frozen in mid-motion. He backed up and keyed his wristpad again. Still dead. The display showed a faint ghost image of the Titan Delta logo before fading to black. Manual beacon override. Then, emergency pulse. He crossed to the wall terminal, punched in his command code, and pulled the physical transmitter handle. No confirmation. No transmission ping. That's when he saw it, scorched into the back wall above the drink dispenser. Burned, not carved, still hot. The numbers glowed faintly red, edges smouldering. CDN. Fresh. He felt the static in his jaw, like a storm inside the walls. The hair on his arms stood at attention, and the metallic taste of electricity flooded his mouth. And something was watching. He couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, but the sensation crawled over him like invisible ants. Eyes, everywhere, nowhere. The nearest terminal flickered to life for just a second. Lines of unfamiliar code scrolled past, too fast to read. Something about the pattern seemed wrong, like a language written backward and upside down. "I'm going to medical," he announced to the frozen room. "And then I'm going to fix whatever the hell this is." No one heard him. No one moved. Except the nearest terminal blinked again. 3 words appeared before vanishing. "Find her first." Medical smelled like bleach and adrenaline. Ellen Vark stood beside a scanner cradle, her dark hair pulled back in a tight knot, already working before he got the door halfway open. She didn't look up when he entered, too focused on the readouts pulsing across her diagnostic screens. 3 bodies, no people, lay on gurneys around her, hooked to monitoring equipment. Their chests rose and fell in perfect synchronization. "I brought guests," he said, nodding toward the mess hall. "I noticed." Her voice was clipped, professional, but tension threaded beneath the words like wire. She finally looked up, her eyes rimmed with fatigue and just a touch of panic, well hidden but there. "You trip a failsafe on the neural grid?" "Nope," he said. "But the clock's had a group stroke. Everything's frozen at 400, and we've got statues in the mess hall." "Alive?" "Technically." He pushed closer to her workstation. "What about these 3? "Same condition. Found them collapsed in maintenance. Heart rate, respiration, normal. Brainwaves are flat. Not coma, not death. Something else." She turned back to the scanner. A worker was laid out inside, hooked to every kind of sensor they could still coax power from. "Like someone wiped the drive?" Rafe leaned over her shoulder, close enough that he could smell the antiseptic soap she used. "Or turned off the lights." She stepped aside slightly, creating space between them. Old habits. "Look at this." She brought up a waveform on her auxiliary display. Tight, repeating patterns ran across the screen. 4-hour intervals. Precise. Clean. "Signal interference?" Rafe asked, squinting at the data. "It's not interference. It's intentional." Ellen's voice hardened. "M pulses at fixed intervals, broadcasting directly into our neural mesh implants. The next one hits in." She checked her backup chrono. 3 hours and 48 minutes. "Where's it coming from?" "Everywhere." She tapped through 3 more displays, each showing the same signal pattern from different sectors of the station. "It's like the walls themselves are transmitting." The lights dimmed again. The scanner buzzer, then crackled like static-laden radio. Ellen's voice dropped. It's broadcasting inside the neural mesh. That's why everyone's frozen. Their implants are being overridden. Then why aren't we affected? Rafe asked, touching the base of his skull where his own implant rested. Question for later. Right now. Delta, Rafe interrupted, calling out to the main AI. Status check. A voice answered. Not Delta. Not human. Whispers curled out of the speaker grill, dry and close, like the sound of dead leaves against concrete. We are many. Ellen froze, her hand halfway to her tablet. We are soon. Rafe reached for his sidearm, drawing it with practiced efficiency. We are never. The medbay went dead silent. Then the light stabilized, and the speaker went dark. Ellen looked at him. That wasn't a glitch. Nope. That was a message. Yep. He kept his weapon drawn, scanning the room methodically. You look calm, she observed. I'm not, he said, checking the nearest vent grate. I'm way past calm. I've looped around into numb. Her datapad chimed suddenly, a harsh, electronic bark in the silence. She looked down, blinked, then blinked again. What? Rafe asked, pivoting toward her. External contact, she said, voice hollow. Something just entered orbital range. From where? He closed the distance between them in 2 strides. She turned the screen toward him. The text glowed stark against the black background. ID. Vector shade. Registry. Earth Transport 7A. 3912. Status. Lost. Year 2000. 184. Destination. Unknown. Fate. Presumed destroyed. Jupiter entry confirmed. Isn't that the one that vanished in the red spot? He asked, recognizing the infamous name. It burned in, she said. Her finger traced the text. Autologs ended mid-transmission. They found no wreckage, not even debris. So either someone copied a long-dead ship's signal profile. Rafe holstered his weapon. Or it came back, Ellen finished. After 40 years. The ship's spectrographic analysis appeared on screen. Metal composition, radiation signature, hull configuration, all matching the records of a vessel that should have been atomized decades ago. The scan showed structural damage consistent with massive gravitational forces, but the ship was intact. Operational. They stared at the data silently for a moment. Outside, something metallic groaned, the station adjusting to thermal expansion, or something worse. 3 hours and 43 minutes until the next pulse, Ellen said quietly. Rafe nodded at the frozen patients. And who knows what happens to them when it hits. On the wall display, the docking trajectory of the vector shade appeared. A slow, deliberate approach to Titan Delta's primary airlock. They're coming in, Ellen whispered. Then Rafe muttered, Well, I was overdue for a really stupid idea. Ellen glanced at him, one eyebrow raised. Let's go say hello. He checked his sidearm and grabbed a medkit from the wall. Before whatever's on that ship decides to say hello to us. Part 2. We thought it was a message. It wasn't. It was an answer. Rafe stood with his arms crossed, watching the signal cycle on Ellen's cracked display screen. The hypnotic pattern pulsed in perfect rhythm-clean spikes, spaced exactly 400 seconds apart. Every 4 hours, like clockwork. Literally. There, Ellen said, freezing the display and zooming in on a particular waveform cluster. Her fingers danced across the controls, with practiced precision, isolating frequency bands and mapping resonance patterns. Titanium rings clinked softly against the console as she worked, a nervous habit from her days in Earth's gravity. It's not just structured, she continued, brow furrowed, lip caught between her teeth. It's patterned across multiple frequency bands. EM, subsonic, even narrow-band thermal. Look at this convergence point. Let me guess, Rafe said, leaning against the bulkhead. It's also singing nursery rhymes backward and predicting my ex-girlfriend's birthdays. She didn't smile. The dark circles under her eyes had deepened in the last hour, and her usual composure showed hairline fractures. This isn't just a transmission. It's too recursive, too reactive. When I isolate one frequency, the others compensate. It's adapting. Meaning? Rafe pushed off the wall, approaching the monitor. Ellen looked up, meeting his eyes directly. It's not sending a signal. It's listening for one. Rafe leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers as he studied the display. The waveform danced in synchronized pulses, like a conversation in some alien Morse code. Wait, you're saying we didn't trigger it? No, she said, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. Something else did. Maybe centuries ago. Maybe just now. Her finger traced the pattern's evolution on the screen. Either way, this isn't a broadcast. It's a beacon. She tapped the screen with emphasis. It's responding. Outside, the hull moaned softly. Titan's slow gravity tugging at metal that had been in space too long. Stress fractures forming in the station's bones. The room shook once. Then again, harder this time, sending loose tools clattering across the floor. The AI's voice flickered to life over the intercom, glitching like a scratched vinyl record. Grav stab field unstable. Heat exchange irregular. We are hungry. Then it cut out, replaced by the soft hiss of static before falling silent altogether. Rafe stared at the ceiling, hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. Did the toaster just say it's hungry? Ellen ignored him, already pulling up diagnostic screens. Data streams scrolled past at dizzying speeds as she cross-referenced system failures. The station's infrastructure is degrading exponentially. It's like the signal's interfering with more than just neural implants. It's thinking, learning. Every time it pulses, the corruption spreads deeper into our systems. She pointed to a schematic of Titan Delta's power grid. Red warning indicators flashed across critical junction points. Life support showed cascading failures in 3 sectors. 2 more pulses, she said, voice tight with controlled fear. And we lose environmental controls. Good thing we've got a ghost ship in orbit, Rafe said, pushing off the wall and checking his equipment harness. Field trip? Ellen looked back at the signal display, then at the clock. 2:13, until the next pulse. She grabbed her gear without another word, slinging the heavy medical pack over her shoulder. The weight of it pulled her slight frame to one side, but she compensated with the ease of someone who'd spent years working in variable gravity. As they headed for the door, she paused to download the signal data to her portable scanner. The information might be their only real weapon. What about them? Rafe nodded toward the frozen patients. Nothing we can do until we understand what's happening, she replied, not meeting his eyes. If we're not back before the next pulse. She let the sentence hang, unfinished in the sterile air. The EVA prep room smelled like ozone and anxiety, with undertones of recycled sweat and industrial lubricant. Warning lights pulsed along the walls, casting everything in alternating shadow and harsh red illumination. Rafe checked his mag boots for the 3rd time, testing the electromagnetic grip against the metal floor plates. The reassuring click-thunk of connection sounded right, but his standard procedure had saved his life more than once. He cinched his holster tight against his thigh and made sure his helmet seals were pristine. Why is it always the creepy abandoned ships? He asked, watching Ellen methodically prepare her own suit. Just once I'd like to investigate a derelict luxury cruise liner, with a functioning bar. Ellen tightened her collar seal with practiced efficiency. Would you prefer the haunted mining tunnels again? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. The ones where Jenkins lost his mind and tried to perform impromptu surgery on himself? They had better lighting, Rafe countered, securing his emergency oxygen pack. And fewer dead people. So far, she murmured, checking her scanner's power levels. The docking umbilical hissed as the pressurization sequence engaged, the metal tube extending like a mechanical tentacle toward the waiting vessel. Outside, through the small viewport, the vector shade loomed like a corpse in the black, hulking and silent, its hull pitted from micrometeors and Jupiter's radiation belts. The name was barely visible on the side in flaking grey stenciling, half obscured by scorching that no ship should have survived. Their access pod latched with a metallic thunk that reverberated through their boots, and the airlock cycled open with a sigh like a dying breath. Ladies first? Rafe offered. Age before beauty, Ellen countered. Careful, Doc. I've only got so many feelings left to hurt. They both hesitated before the threshold. Something instinctive, primal, like animals sensing a predator. They stepped into darkness together. The shade greeted them with frost-laced silence. Thin ice webbed the corridor walls in delicate crystalline patterns, glittering faintly in the beam of their helmet lights. Emergency lights flickered in pale amber along the baseboards, painting the hallways in sickly hues that made the shadows seem deeper, more absolute. Rafe's voice buzzed in Ellen's headset. You getting this too? Low-level EM hum. Probably bleed from that signal, she replied, adjusting her scanner. The readings fluctuated wildly, needle jumping across the gauge like it couldn't decide what it was measuring. Or the ghost of a pissed-off janitor, he muttered, sweeping his light across a row of crew lockers. Each stood partially open, contents undisturbed but frosted over with a thin layer of ice. Personal items remained in place, a photograph here, a trinket there, no signs of panic or evacuation. The first body floated 10 meters in, a man in a standard Earth transport uniform, pale as marble, eyes wide open, staring at nothing. Rafe caught him gently, steadying the drift with one hand against the man's shoulder. Ellen scanned him methodically, her medical training taking over. Vitals ceased, but recently... He's not decomposed, Rafe observed, studying the man's unlined face. Shouldn't he be, 40 years worth of dead? No biological breakdown, no putrefaction. She looked at the frost, crusting the corpse's brow, delicate as lace. It's like something just switched him off, like unplugging a machine. Time of death? Her scanner beeped softly. If these readings are correct, less than 72 hours ago. Rafe's gaze moved to the man's name badge. Technician Foster, J. That's impossible, he whispered. This ship disappeared in 2184. They moved deeper into the vessel. More bodies. Some mid-step. One woman had collapsed against a navigation console, fingers still poised above a key as if about to enter coordinates. Another drifted upside down near the ceiling, caught in a slow roll like a ballet dancer in zero gravity. All were eerily calm, peaceful even. No signs of violence. No struggle. Just silence. It's like they all stopped at once, Ellen said, her voice tight in the comlink. Whatever happened on Titan Delta, it happened here first. Rafe paused at a junction, studying the ship's layout on his HUD. Engineering is 2 decks down. If there's an answer, it'll be near the power core. Or we could, leave and nuke this thing from orbit, Ellen suggested without much hope. And miss the chance to poke around inside a ship that's been missing for 40 years. Where's your scientific curiosity? It died with Technician Foster. They moved toward the central access shaft, their mag boots clicking against the deck in a rhythm that echoed through the empty corridors. The engine room door was sealed with a manual override. Rust stained the handle, impossible in the vacuum of space, and someone had scrawled a message into the paint with trembling fingers. I don't think about it. Ellen stared at the words, her helmet light illuminating each crude letter. That's not foreboding at all. Could be the ship's motto? Rafe suggested, examining the locking mechanism. Very zen. He wrapped his gloved hand around the manual override and twisted. The mechanism resisted, then broke free with a shriek of metal that transmitted through his suit into his bones. The door cracked open an inch, and cold light spilled through the gap. Rafe pushed it wider. After you. Why am I always the canary? Ellen muttered. But she slipped through the opening anyway, scanner held before her like a shield. They stepped inside together. The room was enormous, circular, ribbed with power conduits, and dark steel supports that arched overhead like the skeleton of some mechanical leviathan. The lights were dim, save for a soft glow in the center of the chamber. It hovered there, impossibly, a black sphere, suspended in midair, 6 feet wide, smooth as glass, etched with constantly shifting symbols that slid across its surface like oil on water. It defied gravity, rotating slowly on an unseen axis, and seemed to bend the light around it like a hole punched through reality itself. It pulsed. Once. Like a heartbeat. Rafe stopped in his tracks. Oh, hell no. Ellen stepped forward slowly, eyes wide, with a mixture of scientific fascination and primal fear. That's not tech. You don't say. It's not broadcasting, she whispered, scanner forgotten in her hand as she approached the sphere. It's resonating, creating standing waves in space-time. The device in her hand chirped frantically, then died. The display flickered once before going dark. Rafe's helmet HUD flickered in response. Static washed across the screen, distorting his oxygen readings and suit diagnostics. He blinked twice to reset it, the standard troubleshooting procedure, and froze. He was back in the colony mess. Except, it wasn't now. It was 7 years ago. The walls were bright. Laughter echoed from every corner. A woman was smiling at him from across the table, dark hair, warm eyes, that crooked smile he hadn't seen in half a decade. The one who'd left when the demons in his head got too loud. Don't do this, he whispered to the empty air. The scene flickered. Gone, he gasped, stumbling back against a support strut, the impact jarring through his suit. What happened? Ellen grabbed his arm, anchoring him. Too sore. He shook his head, trying to clear the lingering after-images. It showed me something. Someone from before. I know. Her voice was trembling. It showed me too. What? His eyes searched hers through their visors. She didn't answer. The tight line of her mouth was answer enough. The sphere pulsed again, louder now. The symbols moved faster, more vivid, more complex. Light from nowhere glinted off its surface, highlighting patterns that seemed to repeat and evolve like some kind of visual language. Their HUDs scrambled. Images, voices, smells infiltrating their senses. A child laughing. A name long forgotten. Pain, anger, grief. Memories extracted and displayed with no mercy. It was inside their heads. Rafe gritted his teeth against the mental intrusion. It's not just reacting, it's digging, mining data. Ellen moved closer to the sphere, drawn despite herself. Her gloved fingers hovered just above the surface, as if pulled by magnetic attraction. The symbols. They're changing in response to our thoughts. The sphere didn't react to her proximity, but the air did. The temperature dropped precipitously. Their suit thermometers registered the plunge, frost forming instantly on their visors. The emergency lights flickered, dimming before surging to painful brightness. Then came the voice. Not through the air, not through the comm. Inside. We heard your kind before. Rafe staggered back, his hands flying to the sides of his helmet as if he could block the sound. You made noise. You left signals. And you waited. The voice wasn't sound, it was pure concept, bypassing language centers and implanting meaning directly. The black surface rippled. A face appeared, Rafe's own smiling, cold, impossibly rendered on the sphere's surface. Now we answer. The chamber groaned around them. Power fluctuations danced along the walls like lightning, jumping from conduit to conduit. The ship itself seemed to shudder under their feet. Ellen grabbed Rafe's arm, her fingers digging into his suit material. It's not transmitting, it's translating, echoing something from elsewhere. You mean like a cosmic voicemail? He tried for humor, but his voice cracked. No, she said, eyes fixed on the sphere as it began to rotate faster. Worse. The sphere pulsed again, a third time. Each beat stronger than the last, like something waking up. Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible over the growing hum that filled the chamber. It's not broadcasting, it's answering. The sphere's rotation increased. Symbols flowed across its surface faster now, becoming a blur of light and shadow. The temperature continued to plummet, ice forming on every surface around them. Answering what? Rafe demanded, backing toward the door. His suit warnings flashed. Extreme cold, radiation spikes, anomalous pressure readings. Everything, Ellen said, her eyes reflecting the sphere's shifting patterns. Every signal we've ever sent into space. Every radio broadcast. Every probe. All those messages asking if anyone's out there. The black surface pulsed once more, and a new pattern emerged. A perfect representation of the Pioneer plaque, the Arecibo message, the Voyager golden record, Earth's earliest attempts to reach the stars. And something heard them, she finished. The sphere began to crack, hairline fractures appearing across its surface. Light poured through the fissures, not the warm glow of illumination, but the cold radiance of something that had never known darkness. "Time to go," Rafe said, grabbing her arm. "Now." She resisted for a moment, transfixed by the breaking sphere. "We need to understand what." The voice returned, louder now, filling their minds. "Your time is stopped." The sphere's fractures widened. "We come through." Rafe yanked Ellen toward the door with enough force to break her trance. "Understand it later. From a distance. Preferably with several large weapons between us and it." They stumbled through the doorway as the first pieces of the sphere began to fall away, revealing something within, something that bent light in ways that hurt to perceive, that made the mind skitter away in self-defense. "Seal it!" Ellen shouted as they cleared the threshold. Rafe slammed the manual override, spinning the wheel until the locking bolts engaged. The door shuddered as something impacted from inside. Once, twice, then fell silent. They didn't wait to see if the seal would hold. They ran, mag boots clacking against the deck plates in a frantic rhythm. Behind them, a cold light began to seep through the seams of the engine room door. "What the hell was that thing?" Rafe gasped as they reached the main corridor. "A translator," Ellen said, voice tight with fear and exertion. "Or a gateway, maybe both." "To what?" "To whatever heard our signals and decided to answer," Rafe finished, his pace never slowing. "Remind me to hang up the next time something calls from beyond the orbit of Neptune." The ship's bulkheads creaked around them, metal contracting in the impossible cold that spread from the engine room. Frost patterns raced along the walls like living things, beautiful and terrifying. They reached the airlock just as their suit warnings redlined, temperature beyond operational limits, power reserves depleting rapidly. Rafe slapped the emergency cycle button. The outer door slid open with excruciating slowness. "Hurry!" They tumbled through into the umbilical, the relative warmth of the connector tube feeling like a furnace after the frozen ship. "Seal it off," Ellen gasped as they reached Titan Delta's airlock. "Emergency protocols." Rafe was already at the controls, initiating emergency disconnect. "We've got bigger problems." He pointed to his chronometer. 0, 4, until the next pulse. Ellen's eyes widened. "We won't make it back to medical." "Then we better hope your theory about the signal was right," Rafe said, cycling the airlock closed behind them. The countdown reached 0. The lights throughout Titan Delta flickered. And somewhere in the void between them and the vector shade, something answered. Part 3. It wanted a reply. We gave it one. The elevator groaned as it descended back toward the main habitat ring, hydraulics laboring under decades of strain. Cold metal walls surrounded them, indifferent to the horrors they'd just witnessed. Rafe leaned against the handrail, helmet tucked under his arm, chest still tight from the low-G sprint off the vector shade. Sweat beaded his forehead and the back of his neck, cooling rapidly in the station's recycled air. His mind buzzed with images, memories the sphere had pulled up like a magician flipping cards in his face. A birthday party he barely remembered, Mojave Colony, age 8, chocolate cake melting in the heat. His brother's face, younger, laughing at some forgotten joke. Ellen's voice in a corridor, right before she left for her Earth rotation 2 years ago. "Some things can't be fixed, Rafe. All twisted, all wrong. Like photos dipped in acid, edges warping. It knew things," he said, breaking the silence. "Things I've never told anyone." Ellen stood across from him, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Her eyes hadn't met his once since the sphere incident. The soft emergency lighting cast shadows beneath her cheekbones, making her look gaunt, haunted. He got the feeling it had shown her something, too. Something personal, something painful. "Neural mesh," she replied, voice clinical. Our implants store everything we experience in buffer memory. The sphere accessed it somehow. But how did it know which memories to... When the elevator doors opened, the lights in the corridor flickered. Then went dark. Emergency strips blinked to life, pulsing red down the length of the hallway like a vein under stress. The effect was disorienting, turning the familiar corridor into something alien and threatening. A new voice crackled overhead. Not the AI. Not the sphere. It sounded like both. Layered together, harmonics all wrong. Sector 5. Offline. We are become. We are the echo of many. Rafe winced, the sound grating against his nerves like fingernails on carbon steel. Well, that's not going in the system report. Ellen's hand hovered near her sidearm, fingers twitching with indecision. It's spreading. Whatever was on that ship, it's infected our station systems. They passed a medtech in the hallway, slumped against the wall like a discarded mannequin. His eyes were open, vacant, blinking without focus. ID badge. Rivera. B. Senior technician. Rafe crouched, snapped fingers near the man's face. The sound was sharp in the hushed corridor. No response. Not even a flinch. Vitals? Ellen asked, already pulling a scanner from her belt pouch. Rafe touched the man's neck, feeling for a pulse. The skin was warm, alive, breathing, but slow, like he's in deep sleep with his eyes open. She knelt beside him, professional instincts overriding her fear. Her scanner hummed softly as she passed it over Rivera's head. She gently pried open one eyelid further. The pupil didn't contract against the penlight. She shook her head, lips pressed into a thin line. Another one down. Neural activity minimal, just enough to maintain autonomic functions. How many is that now? She glanced at her wrist display, tapping through screens with practiced precision. System scan says 73 implants are non-responsive. Half the station. Christ. Rafe stood, rubbing his temples where a headache was beginning to form. And we were gone. What? 2 hours? And it's accelerating, Ellen confirmed, her voice dropping. At this rate, we've got maybe 6 hours before everyone's affected. Rafe helped her position Rivera more comfortably against the wall. It felt wrong to leave him, but there was nothing they could do. Not yet. The next signal pulse? He asked. 97 minutes. They continued down the corridor, passing 2 more affected crew members. Neither spoke as they stepped around their colleagues' vacant forms. What was there to say? Back in the lab, Ellen yanked off her gloves and threw them at the counter. They bounced once, pathetically, before sliding to the floor. All right, she snapped, pacing the length of the small room. Her boots clicked against the floor tiles in an angry rhythm. Let's say the sphere's not a weapon, at least not in the traditional sense. It's a relay, a translator, a feedback loop. She stopped, hands cutting through the air as she organized her thoughts. It doesn't think, it mimics, so whatever signal it's bouncing back, it's someone else's. Rafe perched on the edge of a workbench, arms crossed. Like what? Some ancient alien Alexa asking if we'd like to reorder existential dread. Ellen didn't laugh. She barely even smiled. Instead, she pivoted toward her workstation, fingers flying across the interface. She brought up the full scan of the sphere, processed during their boarding. The holographic display rendered it in translucent blue, rotating slowly. Here, she said, tapping a point beneath the surface layer. The display zoomed, revealing intricate structures beneath the shifting symbols. There's a secondary architecture, mechanical, not organic, old tech, human. Rafe stepped closer, squinting at the complex lattice of components. From the Vector Shade crew. Maybe. She manipulated the display, highlighting a specific structure. Looks like someone tried to build a containment system into the relay. A firewall, of sorts. Physical, not digital. They knew what they were dealing with. She zoomed in on the substructure. A tiny cylinder embedded in the core, wrapped in containment shielding. A cluster of charges surrounding it like a bomb's nervous system. The design was elegant, desperate. Rafe stared, recognition dawning. That a detonation mechanism. Fail-safe, she confirmed, nodding grimly. A cascade. Trigger it and the relay collapses. Implodes the cognitive field. So, we pull the pin, drop the ball, and we're clear. He straightened, energy returning to his posture. Action. Finally something concrete they could do. She turned to face him fully, expression grave. The holographic light cast her features in harsh relief. No. We're inside the field now. Everyone on Titan Delta with an implant is... You trigger it. You break the connection, but the blowback fries the neural mesh. Full cascade interference. Rafe went still. Hope draining from his face. Best case scenario. Coma, she said, voice softening with professional detachment. Worst case? Brain death. Total personality wipe. Burnt synapses. He stepped back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. How many on board have implants? All of them! Her eyes held his, unflinching. Standard corporate policy. Neural mesh integration is in everyone's contract. Including us. She nodded. One sharp movement. Outside the medbay window, the stars blinked against the black like something watching. Titan's methane haze glowed faintly in the distance, the gas giant Jupiter, a looming presence beyond. There has to be another way, Rafe said, voice hardening with determination. Ellen turned back to the display, manipulating the image. Maybe. I downloaded schematics from the Vector Shade's mainframe. Look at this. The sphere's interior structure expanded, revealing more detail. Whoever built this failsafe wasn't just trying to destroy it. They were trying to contain whatever was coming through. She highlighted a series of channels running through the sphere's core. These looked like buffer circuits, designed to process and filter the signal. So they knew it was dangerous, Rafe concluded. And they tried to control it. Ellen's face lit with cautious hope. If I can modify the failsafe, target just the relay function without collapsing the field entirely, we might be able to cut the connection without frying everyone's brains. Exactly. She was already pulling equipment from storage cabinets, assembling a portable interface kit. But I need to get back to the sphere, and we're running out of time. They sat on a bench just outside the lab, taking a moment to rest before heading back to the Vector Shade. The corridor was eerily quiet, the usual background hum of station operations muted by failing systems. Rafe finally broke the silence. I signed up for this gig thinking I'd deal with the occasional bar fight and maybe a smuggling ring, not this. He gestured vaguely at the ceiling, encompassing the entire situation. Sentient signal ghosts and antique space brains. Ellen gave a dry chuckle, the sound rusty from disuse. You were always a magnet for weird. Remember the incident with the terraforming bacteria on Europa? Don't remind me. I still can't eat blue foods. He smiled briefly before his expression sobered. What did you see? In the sphere? She stiffened, eyes fixed on the opposite wall. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. I saw my dad, she said quietly, in the sphere. Rafe turned to her. Yeah? Last time I saw him, he was dying in hospice. Couldn't remember my name. Her voice cracked slightly, the professional veneer slipping. The sphere remembered. The voice it gave him, it was right. Perfect. Not like a recording. Like he was really there, telling me he was proud of my work. Things he never got to say before the dementia took him. She looked down at her hands, watching her own fingers twist together. For a second, I wanted to stay there, with him, even knowing it wasn't real. Rafe looked down at his boots. I saw my brother. He's still alive. Haven't spoken in 5 years. Why? Rafe shrugged, a studied casualness. Because I'm an idiot. Last time we talked, he asked me to come home for his kid's birthday. I was working a security job on Ganymede. Told him I was too busy. He paused, swallowing. The sphere showed me what that party looked like. His daughter asking where Uncle Rafe was. That's cruel, Ellen said softly. Or kind, he countered. Depends on how you look at it. Maybe it was trying to give me what I needed. They sat in silence again, breathing in recycled air that somehow felt thinner than usual. The emergency strips continued their rhythmic pulsing, washing them in alternating shadow and crimson light. A distant crash echoed from somewhere in the station, metal on metal. Then Rafe stood, determination hardening his features. So what do we do? Ellen didn't answer right away. She stared at her scanner, watching the countdown to the next pulse. 54, 17, and falling fast. Then she looked up at him, eyes glassy but resolute. If we do nothing, everyone here will be a hollowed-out meat shell by sunrise. Rafe snorted. Catchy. You should put that on the station brochure. We don't have time to engineer a surgical fix. I could maybe localize the cascade, soften the blow to the implants, but she stopped herself, hesitation in her voice. But it'll still burn us. Hard. She held his gaze. We might lose memories, cognitive function. Even if I can manage a controlled implosion, the feedback through the neural mesh will be severe. Rafe took a long breath, weighing their options, which were effectively none. He looked at the corridor's cracked paneling, the flickering lights, the drifting voices that weren't supposed to exist. He thought of Holt and Dunbar, still standing like statues in the mess. Of the tech he'd passed, slumped against the wall. Of the face the sphere showed him, his own, smiling like a stranger. He looked back at Ellen. Do it. Her eyes widened. Rafe, we'll both go. We both know what we're getting into. No. She stood, facing him directly. The modifications need to be done on site. Someone needs to trigger the cascade, and someone needs to stay here to monitor the station's systems. If we both go, and something goes wrong, I'm not sending you alone. And I'm not going to cook your brain because of some macho savior. It's not macho, he said quietly. It's math. She didn't speak, the unspoken logic hanging between them. I'd rather go out me than spend the rest of my life staring at a wall while some alien radio DJ plays reruns of my childhood trauma, he continued. Besides, you're the doctor. You're the only one who understands how to modify that thing. Ellen swallowed hard. You might die. I might already be dead. He tried to smile. But if I wake up and you've turned me into a cabbage, please give me a funny name. Like Pickle. She stared at him. Then, for the first time in hours, she laughed, sharp, broken, but real. Pickle Cordero. Security vegetable. Has a ring to it. He reached out, hesitantly placing a hand on her shoulder. We're out of options, Ellen. And we're out of time. She covered his hand with hers briefly, before moving to gather her equipment. I'll need to modify the control interface. Create a buffer between the cascade and our neural implants. How long? 20 minutes. Maybe 30. I'll prep the shuttle, he said, already moving toward the door. And Ellen? She looked up. If this works, I'm taking a vacation. A real one. Maybe call my brother. She nodded, a ghost of a smile on her lips. I'll hold you to that. They returned to the relay chamber on the vector shade, the trip somehow faster and more ominous than before. The ship felt different now, colder, more aware. The dead crew members they passed seemed to watch them with unseeing eyes. The sphere was brighter now, pulsing with internal energy. Symbols ran faster across its surface, cycling through languages, glyphs, numbers, scripts Rafe didn't recognize. Ancient Sumerian mixed with binary code, mixed with mathematical formulations no human had ever conceived. The air felt heavier, like gravity itself was leaning in to listen. It's evolving, Ellen whispered, the words barely audible, learning from every mind it touches. Rafe kept his eyes on the sphere, watching for any change. Is that how it works? It absorbs knowledge from the people it takes? Not just knowledge, experience, memory, identity. She unfolded her portable workstation, connecting cables to the original failsafe system. It's why it seems so human sometimes, why it can mimic us so perfectly. It's building itself from pieces of us. Comforting. Ellen set her toolkit down beside the console and pulled up the embedded failsafe. Her hands moved fast, precise. She was back in doctor mode, cool and composed. I'm modifying the cascade parameters, trying to isolate just the transmission functions. Rafe stood by the door, watching the hall, gun drawn, even though he knew it wouldn't help against whatever they were facing. The weight of the weapon was still reassuring, a connection to something tangible and understandable. "I'm overriding the relay's safeguard," she said after several minutes of tense work. "Manual fuse. Once I trigger, we've got maybe 90 seconds until implosion. Enough time to say a prayer or panic quietly." He checked his chronometer. 17:32 until the next scheduled pulse. She opened a small hatch and revealed the failsafe core, 6 silver nodes wrapped in heat shielding, all pulsing softly in synchronization with the sphere. "It's beautiful, in a way," she murmured almost to herself. "Like nothing we've ever built. It's listening," she added, voice dropping. "It knows what we're doing." The sphere pulsed in response, as if acknowledging her words. The lights dimmed throughout the chamber, then brightened to painful intensity. Rafe felt a pressure in his skull. Not pain, not sound. A presence, filling the spaces between thoughts. "You will end us." The voice wasn't spoken. It simply existed, bypassing his ears entirely. He gritted his teeth against the intrusion. "Don't tempt me. You are not yours. You are passage. You are voice." The pressure increased, images flashing behind his eyes. Earth seen from orbit, the mining colonies on Mars, the research stations of Europa. Human achievements, human knowledge, human memory. "Yeah, well, consider this a dropped call." He moved closer to Ellen, positioning himself between her and the sphere. "How much longer?" "Almost there." Her fingers flew across the console, making final adjustments. "I've isolated the transmission circuits. The cascade should collapse the field without completely destroying the neural buffer." "Should. Best I can do without a few years of research and a team of specialists." She looked up at him. "We still don't know exactly what this is, Rafe. We're shooting in the dark." The sphere's pulsing increased, symbols flowing faster. The air in the chamber began to shimmer, reality itself seeming to bend around the artifact. "We are becoming," the voice said louder now. "We are remembering all that you are." Ellen's hands hovered over the trigger pad. The modified sequence was loaded, ready to execute. She looked up at him, uncertainty and determination warring in her expression. Rafe nodded once, decision made. "Do it." She pressed the button. The failsafe core beeped once, twice. Then the sphere screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a collapse. A twisting in the air like the world had folded in on itself. The floor surged upward as if gravity had reversed. The lights shattered, plunging the room into darkness illuminated only by the sphere's dying glow. The walls bent inward, metal creaking under impossible stress. Rafe felt his knees buckle, his thoughts stutter, something ripping through his mind like fire through paper. His implant burned white-hot at the base of his skull, neural pathways flaring with overload. He saw stars where none should be. He saw Ellen's face dissolve into light. He saw sequences of memories, his own, others, fragments of lives he'd never lived, cascade through his consciousness like falling dominoes. Knowledge that wasn't his filled his mind. The orbital mechanics of distant solar systems, the taste of foods that had never existed on Earth, the sensation of breathing atmospheres no human lung had ever processed. And then, blackness. Complete. Absolute. A void so perfect it seemed to have substance. Somewhere, distantly, he thought he heard Ellen calling his name. The sound faded, replaced by silence. Then a single thought, perhaps his own, perhaps not. "We have answered. Now you must listen." The darkness consumed everything. Part 4. We closed the circuit. Something answered. The medbay ceiling was painfully bright. Rafe groaned and rolled his head to the side, the motion sending a shot of nausea through his skull like someone had rewired his brain with barbed wire. Everything was stiff. His fingers, his spine, his thoughts. Light stabbed through his eyelids with surgical precision. The lights were too clean, too sterile. He was alive. Possibly. Welcome back, sleeping ugly. Ellen's voice came from somewhere to his left, raw but unmistakably smug. Rafe turned, squinting through the haze of pain and disorientation. She sat in a chair beside the medbed, pale and bruised, with a datapad resting in her lap. Her left eye was swollen, purplish blue fanning out across her cheekbone, and one sleeve of her jacket was burnt through at the elbow, revealing angry red skin beneath. But she was upright, and she was smiling. Barely. How? He croaked something vaguely human, his throat feeling like he'd swallowed sand. She handed him a water pack and waited as he drained it, like a dying man in the desert, the cool liquid sending a shock through his system. When he could speak again, he managed. How long was I out? Burnout was worse than I expected, she said, checking something on her datapad. You were out 12 hours. I almost started calling you Pickle. He managed a rough laugh that felt like grinding glass in his throat. Still got my sarcasm module, I see. Yours? Maybe. Mine's short-circuited. She tapped her temple where her own implant nestled. Feedback loop nearly fried the language center. I spent an hour speaking what the med AI tells me was fluent gibberish. She didn't mention the dark circles under his eyes, the tremor in his hands, the faint red scars around the implant socket behind his right ear that looked like lightning strikes against his skin. She didn't need to. He knew. The cascade had hit like a solar flare. A wall of pain and noise and pressure, then nothing. Oblivion. He'd expected to wake up drooling into a corner, his personality wiped clean, a blank slate where Rafael Cordero used to be. Instead, here he was. Still him. Mostly. Did we win? He asked, the question sounding hollow even to his own ears. Ellen's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. We survived. That's something. Ellen helped him sit up. Every muscle screamed in protest like they'd been stretched and then reassembled incorrectly, but he didn't fall over, so that counted as a win. How many? He asked, the question that had been weighing on him since consciousness returned. 78 affected in total, she said, checking her notes. We managed to stabilize 63. Some are already talking. A few don't remember what day it is, or what year. Holt from the mess hall thinks she's still in training on Luna, keeps asking about her graduation exam. And the others? He asked the question, though he already knew the answer from her expression. Her jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. We're still running scans. 5 are non-responsive. Complete neural shutdown. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. 10 didn't make it through the cascade. A long pause settled between them, heavy with the names she wasn't saying. Rafe exhaled slowly, careful not to aggravate his pounding headache. Still better than 0. That's what I keep telling myself. She stood, pacing slowly across the medbay. Her limp was subtle, but he caught it. Left leg, probably a strained muscle or ligament. Probably from the blast wave. The last thing he remembered before blacking out was the sphere turning inside out, collapsing in a flash of light and soundless pressure, like the universe sneezed and deleted a thought mid-sentence. Can you remember everything? She asked, her doctor's instincts taking over. Any gaps in memory? Confusion about identity or location? Rafe took mental inventory. I remember the vector shade, the sphere, the countdown. After that, nothing until waking up here. He hesitated. But there's something else. Something new. Ellen turned sharply. Define new. Information I shouldn't have. He struggled to articulate the sensation. Like, I know how to calculate orbital trajectories now. And I can see the chemical structure of this bed's polymer coating. He tapped the surface beneath him. Poly-carbon hybrid matrix. And I know that's not something I should know. She approached, medical scanner in hand. The neural mesh might have picked up data fragments during the cascade. Cross-contamination from other implants. Or from the sphere itself. Great. So I got a brain download from a cosmic horror podcast. He rubbed his temples. What about the signal? Is it still transmitting? Gone. The pulses stopped when the sphere collapsed. Implants aren't receiving anything unusual. And the vector shade? Still dead. Still drifting. We've positioned it in a stable orbit, but I recommended a full quarantine. No boarding parties, no salvage operations. She set down her scanner. Relays inert. Just a hollow shell of exotic materials that our scanners can't identify. So, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. We win? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned the datapad toward him. A terminal screen blinked at the top. Station logs. Auto-feed time-stamped 43 minutes after the sphere's collapse. One line, endlessly scrolling. We are still coming. Next time. No warning. Rafe's mouth dried, the taste of copper flooding his senses. Where'd it come from? He asked, voice dropping to just above a whisper. Nowhere we can trace. No signal path, no carrier band. It didn't come in through comms or the network. She shook her head, genuine fear flickering across her features. It was just there. On every screen, simultaneously. He stared at the message, reading it 3 times, as if repetition might change the words. You're sure it's not the sphere? Some kind of delayed artifact? Even as he asked, he knew the answer. She shook her head and pulled up another screen, showing scan data from after the collapse. The sphere's gone. Relay imploded clean. This came after. She pulled up another screen, medical readouts from his implant during the 12 hours he was unconscious. Look at this, she said, pointing to a specific waveform. Your neural mesh was active during your blackout, not random firing organized patterns, almost like it was processing. Processing what? I don't know, but whatever it wasn't human. Rafe stood slowly, legs unsteady beneath him. He gripped the edge of the bed for support, refusing Ellen's offered arm. This was something he needed to do himself, prove he was still functional, still in control of his own body. He moved toward the medbay window, each step a small victory. Pressing a hand to the cool glass, he stared out at the vast emptiness. Outside, Titan's orange haze glowed like a dying ember against the blackness. The rings of Saturn hung above like a celestial noose, beautiful and threatening all at once. He stared into the stars, suddenly aware of their immensity in a way he'd never felt before. The vastness between them, the cold. The silence that wasn't silence at all, but a cacophony of radiation and gravity waves and particles dancing in patterns humanity had barely begun to comprehend. And he could see it, all of it, knowledge that wasn't his, flowing through neural pathways that had been rewired by something alien. What if, he said quietly, we weren't the target? Ellen turned, brow furrowed. What if we were the conduit? He continued, the pieces falling into place in his mind. What if that signal, whatever it was just waiting for the right neural network to bounce off of, like sonar? She went still, the implications sinking in. He tapped the side of his temple, where the implant nestled against his brain. We didn't just receive it. We retransmitted it. She crossed the room swiftly, pulled up the console, and ran a pulse log. Her fingers flew across the interface, isolating time frames and signal patterns with practiced precision. There it was. A spike. Post-cascade. Not from the vector shade. Not from the station. But from the implant network itself, precisely when Rafe and the other affected crew were unconscious. Ellen stared at the graph, color draining from her face. Holy shit, she whispered, the curse rare from her usually measured lips. We were the antenna. They weren't calling us, Rafe said, the certainty growing with each word. They were calling through us, using our neural networks as amplifiers, maybe even translators. But calling to what? Or whom? Her voice had dropped to match his, as if something might overhear. I don't know, but whatever it is, it heard. He pointed to the message still scrolling across her datapad. And it's answering. A silence settled over the room like a closing lid. Then the lights dimmed, just slightly. Enough to make both of them tense. The environmental controls hummed, then settled back to their normal pitch. Nothing happened. But outside the window, beyond Saturn's rings, the stars twinkled unnaturally. One blinked, Then another, not like starlight, like a pattern, like eyelids, watching. You see that? Rafe whispered, not taking his eyes from the vista. Ellen nodded, her reflection in the glass pale and drawn. Since, right after the cascade, I thought I was hallucinating. You're not. His implant tingled at the base of his skull, a ghost of sensation. They're looking at us. Who? Not who, he replied, knowledge that wasn't his flowing through his mind. What? They sat in the station's half-functioning command deck an hour later. The AI was still mostly offline, running only essential protocols. The auto systems were fried, requiring manual override for everything from door controls to atmospheric regulation. And the coffee dispenser had finally given up the ghost, sputtering pathetically when Ellen tried to coax one final cup from its dying circuits. Rafe had never seen her look more personally offended. Of all the systems to lose, she muttered, glaring at the machine as if her disapproval might revive it. Some things aren't meant to survive cosmic horror, Rafe replied, attempting to recalibrate the environmental sensors with limited success. Like my caffeine intake? Exactly. He handed her a ration bar and a thermos filled with the least worst tea they could synth from the emergency supplies. She took it like it was an insult, but drank anyway, grimacing at the artificial taste. We need to send a report, she said finally, setting the thermos down with a decisive click. Flag this for Earth Command. Let them know that we opened a door and something peeked through. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. And now it's coming to dinner? She glanced at him, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. You're not wrong. Thanks. That almost felt like a compliment. Don't get used to it. She pulled up what remained of their communications array. Half the relay stations were down, but they could still manage an emergency burst transmission. What do we even say? Dear Earth, found alien signal, accidentally amplified it with our brains, may have invited cosmic entities to visit. Please advise. P.S. Send coffee? Sounds comprehensive to me. Rafe's attempt at humor fell flat, even to his own ears. The station lights flickered again. Just once. Enough to remind them that it wasn't over. Not really. Rafe leaned back in the command chair, stretching his arms overhead to work out the lingering stiffness. His implant pinged ghost data, fragments of code flowing through his consciousness. Nothing concrete. But in the silence between systems, in the absence of static, he could feel it. Not noise. Anticipation. Something waiting for them to speak again. If we do send a warning, he said slowly. What if that's exactly what it wants? More networks, more implants, more signals bouncing around. Ellen's fingers paused over the interface. You think we'd just be spreading it? I think we don't understand what it is yet. He tapped his temple. But somehow I know it's listening. Right now. She turned to face him fully, medical concern replacing her earlier sarcasm. How much did the cascade change you, Rafe? I don't know, he admitted. But I'm still me enough to know we need to be careful. A priority alert chimed from the command console. Perimeter sensors detecting movement. Ellen pulled up the external cameras. The vector shade was drifting, its orbit decaying despite the stabilization protocols they'd established. As they watched, a section of the hull seemed to shimmer, distorting like heat waves over desert sand. That's not possible, she whispered. Those are reinforced bulk plates, titanium alloy. It's changing, Rafe said, knowledge flowing through him from elsewhere. Reconfiguring. Into what? The ship's outline blurred further. Structure, flowing like liquid metal. It wasn't dissolving, it was reshaping, becoming something new. Something with purpose. Into a better antenna, he replied, certainty cold in his voice. Later, in the crew lounge, half lit and still slightly tilting from minor structural warping, Rafe sat alone. The auto repair systems were doing their best. Mechanical arms patching hull breaches and replacing damaged circuitry, but it would be weeks before Titan Delta was fully operational again. The others were still being treated. The medical AI was back online, doing its best impression of a bedside nurse, while Ellen supervised the more complex cases personally. The hallways were quiet. For the first time in days, no one was screaming. No one was frozen in place like macabre statuary. But the message was still scrolling on every unsecured monitor. We are still coming. Next time. No warning. He pulled a dented tin case from his jacket pocket, flipped it open with practiced ease. A cigarette, real tobacco, a black market relic from Earth that had cost him 2 months' salary. He stuck it between his lips, struck a match with a flick of his wrist, and lit up. The station's environmental systems detected the smoke immediately, but with the AI running at minimal capacity, no automated warning came. Small blessings. Smoke curled toward the ceiling in lazy spirals. He exhaled slowly, staring out the observation window. Saturn's rings stretched across the vista, bands of ice and rock suspended in eternal orbit. Beautiful from a distance, deadly up close. The stars blinked again. His grip on the cigarette tightened, the paper crinkling beneath his fingers. One blink. Pause. 2 more. A pattern. Deliberate. Mathematical. He didn't know Morse, but he had a feeling he'd be seeing this rhythm in his dreams for years to come. Assuming they had years. Assuming whatever was coming gave them that long. Or maybe that was the point. The waiting. The anticipation. The slow crescendo of dread building in his chest, with each artificial twinkle. He drew in another breath, the embers flaring faint orange in the dimmed lighting of the lounge. The acrid taste filled his lungs, grounding him in the moment, in reality, in his humanity. The silence was thick, as though something waited for a reply, as though the entire cosmos had paused to listen for humanity's response. Behind him, the door slid open. Ellen's footsteps approached, recognizable by their slight asymmetry, that new limp she was trying to hide. "How are they?" he asked without turning. "Stable," she replied, settling into the chair beside his. "Cortical stimulation is working on some of the non-responsive cases. We might get them back." "Good." She glanced at the cigarette with mild disapproval but said nothing. After what they'd been through, small vices seemed insignificant. "The vector shade has stopped changing," she said after a moment. "For now. It's settled into a new configuration, something our scanners can't fully analyze." "Waiting," Rafe murmured. "For what?" "For them." He nodded toward the stars. "Or for us to make the next move." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the unnatural blinking of distant suns. Ellen's fingers drummed a nervous rhythm on the armrest. "I ordered a full evacuation," she finally said. "Emergency protocols. Non-essential personnel ship out in 12 hours. "Good call." He took another drag. "I'm staying." "I know." She didn't sound surprised. "So am I. Someone needs to monitor whatever this is. Try to understand it before it spreads. And if we can't stop it, then at least Earth will have advance warning." Her voice was steady, resigned. Time to prepare. The stars blinked again, more urgently now. The message on the monitors scrolled faster, as if sensing their discussion. "We are still coming. Next time. No warning." He muttered to the stars, voice low and tired, smoke punctuating his words. "Next time they knock, I'm not answering." Ellen's hand found his in the semi-darkness, her grip tight with fear and determination. "I don't think they're asking permission anymore." Outside, in the vast emptiness between worlds, something shifted. A darkness deeper than the void, moving with purpose. Waiting. Watching. Coming. You've been listening to 0 Hour. Mind. Written by Ceri Clark. Narrated using Minimax. Time doesn't stop, but sometimes you fall out of it. Join us again for the next story in the 0 Hour series. About the author. Welsh author Ceri Clark writes fantasy, science fiction, and historical fiction with a speculative twist. Her fascination with science fiction and time travel stems from growing up surrounded by Wales' rich industrial heritage. She lives in Wales with her family, and an adorable but strong-willed dog who frequently interrupts her writing sessions. Her other works include the fantasy sci-fi novel Accidental Immortal, the supernatural romance, Whispers of the Past, and the young adult fantasy, Children of the Elementi. Visit www.cericlark.com, Ceri is spelled with a C, to learn more about upcoming books and connect with the author. If you enjoyed this book, please consider leaving a review to help other readers discover the story.